Hi guys, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming my November wrap-up. So I had a pretty good reading month in November. My mental health has really improved. I participated in NaNoWriMo this month, and sitting down every day and writing 2,000 words and watching this story sort of unfold and like really proving to myself that I am capable of doing something and completing a project has been like really good for my mental health and just my happiness in general. And I found that that productivity from NaNoWriMo sort of spilled over into the rest of my life. Everything seemed to go well this month. That sort of spilled over into my reading. I am going to share with you the things that I read today. Now, a couple of these I did finish right at the end of October, but I filmed my October wrap-up early. So the first one here is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. So this is a collection of short stories that was marketed to me, or like I had always heard about it as feminist fairy tale retellings. And as you guys know, if you've been following along, I'm sort of on this fairy tale kick lately. And so I was really excited to read this. I had the story for a while because when I was a teaching assistant, we read In the Company of Wolves, I believe. Yes, The Company of Wolves. And so it's playing with Little Red Riding Hood. And so my expectations for this book were that they would all be fairy tale retellings, and that's not quite true. So some of the ones I'd start reading and I'd be like, but where's the fairy tale? And then I realized, like, I did a little bit of research, I read the introduction, which I maybe should have done to begin with. Like, once I'd sort of readjusted my mindset around it, I started to really enjoy the really dark stories, because Angela Carter's stories in this collection are pretty dark. I thought it was the perfect way to end October. If you are looking for sort of darker short story reads, I would recommend that you check this out. The next book I read is I suppose it's a novella, and that is the new release from Stephen King called Elevation. And let's just take a minute to appreciate the studio lights are doing a fantastic job of showing how frickin' beautiful this is. This is a weird story. I read it in one afternoon. So it tells the story of a man who is, like, he physically appears overweight, but he notices that without changing anything, like diet, exercise, whatever, the scale is showing his weight going down while the like physical space that he takes up doesn't change. He is trying to bridge the gap with one of his, or two of his neighbors actually. So a lesbian couple moved in and they have opened up a restaurant in town, and the town is really like, ugh, lesbian couple, let's not engage with them in any way. And so it's sort of this connection between people, small town community. I really liked it. It was 100% not at all what I was expecting, but it's just a kind of weird concept and I liked it. The next book I have here is the first book that I actually finished in November. To be honest, this book took me forever to read, but I feel like if I had been able to sit down and read it cover to cover, I might be more in love with it than I am, and that is Pages & Co. Tilly and the Bookwanderers by Anna James. So Anna James does have a YouTube channel, and I will try and remember to link that down below. This is her debut novel, and I think the concept for it is fantastic. So it is about a girl named Tilly who discovers that she can read characters out of books and read herself into books. There's this whole like secret underground community of bookwanderers, and I find that concept fascinating. It's playing with two pieces of classic literature, so classic children's literature, Anne of Green Gables and Alice in Wonderland. If you have somebody in your life who's a huge Anne fan, a huge Alice fan, I think this would make a fun gift for them. If you have a reader in your life who you think might enjoy the concept of somebody playing with books, I think this would make a great gift as well. Oh, the text, I just touched it. I touched it, and like some of the details on the cover are raised. I think this is a fantastic Christmas gift. I'm just recommending all the things. Buy all the things. The next book that I read was part of my 5-star predictions, and I did indeed give this 5 stars, and that was Sabriel by Garth Nix. So this is the first book in the Abortion series trilogy. I'm not sure if you're supposed to pronounce that H or not in Abhorsen, or is it abortion. So this tells the story of Sabriel, who is at a magical boarding school south of the wall, I guess. There's this like magical barrier and the Old Kingdom is on the other side of the wall. She receives this message from her father and these tools from her father that indicates that he's probably not alive. And so she's determined to save him because she has the ability, her father has this ability too, as a person, to travel into death and to pull souls back. I have to reread this because it's been a while now and my fall was so full of fantasy that it's getting a little bit blurry. But I know that when I read this, I devoured it. I loved it. I loved the magic system. I loved the ideas here. Like, one of the things that I found particularly helpful, because I am writing a fantasy novel for NaNoWriMo, I started to realize that I didn't know how to build a magic system. And I was like, how much do authors normally give us? How much am I willing to accept as a reader that's just like, that's just magic. It just works. Don't question it. Because like that's what I was having trouble with in my own writing, was like, how much of this magic system do I have to develop? When I was reading these fantasy texts, I was really paying attention to the magic systems, and I have to say that the magic system here feels really creative. It feels unlike anything that I've read before. Now that could just be my experience in fantasy literature. I haven't come across anything quite like it before, and I really enjoyed this. I am so excited to continue on with the series. I can't wait to pick up Lyriel. This was great. If you haven't read it, I would say it's worth the hype. The next book I read here was another 5-star prediction, and I decided to bury this book between fun fantasy things on either side because I knew it was going to be really intense, and it was. And that is Women Talking, a novel by Miriam Toews. It's based on a true story of a Mennonite colony in Bolivia. The women in the community were, for years, waking up feeling gross, feeling sore, and then one woman stayed up all night and she discovered men breaking into her house with the spray pesticide that they use for their crops that happens to have belladonna in it. So a small group of men in the community, fathers, brothers, sons, was breaking into the women's houses around the community. They were drugging them with pesticides to put them to sleep, and then they were sexually assaulting them. Miriam Toews does this really cool thing with a lot of her work where she blurs the boundaries between fiction and biography, or fiction and nonfiction. She does it with All My Puny Sorrows. She does it with Swing Low a Life. Those are two of my favorites. And she does it here as well because this, of course, is an imagined conversation. The premise here is that these women of the community, they have a unique opportunity because the men of their community have gone into town to post bail because the men who did these things were arrested. Miriam imagines these women meeting to discuss their options. Do nothing, stay and fight, and leave. There is one man left in the community. He's been emasculated by the community because he is not a farmer, so he does not go, but he's a teacher, so he can read and write. And so they ask him, even though they won't be able to read the notes, to make a record that these women are having a conversation. Make a record like, we were here, we have a voice. What's really cool about the text is realizing the ways in which these women's voices are mediated. So first of all, they only speak Plautdeutsch, I believe is how you pronounce it. It is a sort of specific type of German that only Mennonites speak. So because the women only speak this language and they want it in a very accessible language so that more people know their story, the man is translating from their dialect into English as they are speaking. Like, there's so many levels of mediation there because he's taking what they're saying, translating it, and in translation is phrasing it the way he wants it phrased or how he is interpreting their words. So we see how these women's voices are so many times removed, and we just sort of have to trust our narrator, and he keeps inserting his opinion into things. So My battery is dying. It was a hard read, but I loved it. I love Miriam Toews' writing. I love what she does with fiction. I love her explorations of the Mennonite community. She is a Mennonite, or was a Mennonite. I'm not sure if she currently identifies as a Mennonite. But yeah, she's one of my favorite authors, and I fully feel like this book deserves the hype. The next book is a reread for me, and that is Tempest and Slaughter by Tamora Pierce. Now, I did read this on audio because I spent so much of my time writing. I started to rely pretty heavily on audiobooks to fill in the blank spaces. So this is the story of Aram Draper before he becomes the mage that we know as Numair from the Immortals series. This is like his backstory, is prequel. And so he is a student at a magic university, and of course because he is growing up, he goes through puberty, and there are all these scenes where his member gets hard and does things of its own volition, and it makes him uncomfortable. And every time the narrator talked about his member, the fact that they just call it a member instead of his dick or his penis, it makes me feel cringy. I did not like it at all. Like, I don't know if the use of member was Tamora Pierce's choice or if it was her, like, editor's choice. I'm actually trying to think if I've ever read the word penis, dick, whatever in any piece of YA. Or if they just sort of skip over the anatomical body parts. There's something to look for in the future. Do they ever say dick? But yeah, I just think member felt really silly, and hearing a grown-ass woman say member in between like all of the other things she was saying just felt bad. It wasn't as cringy when I read it with my eyes, but listening to it, like standing in the kitchen doing the dishes and having somebody be like, his member got hard, felt really silly. But I did enjoy the reread as a whole. The bits about puberty were very small. I'm so excited for the next book in the series because there was so much going on. The next book that I read was a collection of fairy tales, and that is Fierce Fairy Tales by Nikita Gill. So these are, again, feminist fairy tale retellings, which I thought would be interesting to read alongside Angela Carter. Again, not all fairy tales. Again, these aren't all super fairy tales either, at least not these sort of Grimm Brothers fairy tales that I was expecting. Like, there are other pieces of folklore and like myth in here. I liked some better than others. It's not quite what I was expecting when I thought I was getting poetry. Like, it just feels like someone talking at you. Like, maybe it's supposed to feel like somebody just talking at you because these were oral stories. Some of the ideas were cool. The book is very aesthetically pleasing, but it wasn't fully what I wanted. It's not, I don't know, I can't see myself rereading this. Let's say that. The next book I read was a win. It was on my 5-star predictions. It is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I did read and love City of Ghosts, which is Victoria Schwab's middle grade. I loved her writing. I loved her voice, and so I was very excited to get into more of her adult fiction. I was not disappointed. This is the story of Kel, who is, oh, there's another silly name. What is he? Antari. He's an Antari. At least this one doesn't have any obviously silent letters like abortion, abhorsen, whatever. So he's an Antari, and that means that he has he can access all of the elemental magics, but also blood magic. And this blood magic allows him to travel between 3 parallel Londons. There is Grey London, which is the most like mundane London. It's farthest from the magic, and so people have forgotten about magic there. There is Red London, which is where Kel is from. It's like very full of magic, full of life, full of color. There is White London, which is closest to the magic, and it has been like drained of magic and life and everything is very like cold and colorless there. Then there is Black London, which I guess lost control. The magic sort of overtook them because magic in this world is something with agency, something that is alive and powerful and dangerous, and so Black London sort of succumbed to that. Succumb? Is that a word? It doesn't sound right. Whatever. And so Black London fell and they cut that off. They sealed the door completely off to Black London, and so Kel travels back and forth between these various Londons. So we have 3 accessible parallel worlds that are all very different, but that one overlapping spot in all of the world just happens to be this city called London. The plot really kicks off when Kel accidentally brings back a very dangerous object and has to deal with that. He ends up sort of with this unwelcome, unwanted companion, Lila. I loved Lila. I thought she was fantastic. She just sort of marches to the beat of her own drum. She's a little bit piratey. Her like dream in life is to own a boat and just explore, and I think that is wonderful. The other thing that I was really highlighting here, again, because I am writing a fantasy book and I really wanted to see how the magic systems work, how much information do we need. Every time we were introduced to a little bit of the magic lore, I was like, am I just willing to accept it like that? Or do I need more explanation? Because I'm really trying to walk that line between creating this new fantasy space and a magical setting and logical world rules. So I'm very excited to continue on with this series. I did end up giving this 5 stars. It was a 5-star prediction. The last book I have here was not a super win, which was kind of disappointing, and that is Ash by Melinda Lo. Now, this is a queer Cinderella retelling. I liked how storytelling and fairy tales play a large part in Ash's life. Obviously, I don't really think I need to recap the plot for you because it's Cinderella, but instead of falling for the prince, she falls for a woman who she happens to meet. But everything else is basically your standard Cinderella story. I liked the idea of like the fairies and fae being in the woods, the idea of like the, you know, that sort of traditional idea of if you find fairies in the woods, if you eat food from them, you'll be trapped there forever. If you strike a bargain with a fairy, it's always a double-edged sword. Like, you really have to think before you strike a bargain with a fairy. Once again, these like white-haired, blue-eyed, cold, northern, magical figures show up in this fairy tale. We see similar figures in Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and of course the White Walkers in Game of Thrones. And so, like, I am really, really excited to try and find out more about that folklore specifically. So I've got a little bit of research to do after this on the roots of those figures, because they keep showing up, but they're not showing up in like any of the Grimm fairy tales that I'm reading, at least none that I've come across yet. So I want to look into Russian fairy tales still, and I also want to look into Norse mythology because one of you guys recommended that I do that to maybe find the roots of those characters. The reason I didn't like this, Ash has no personality. She's like this void in the novel that is occasionally wearing rags, occasionally wearing a beautiful gown. Her insta-love with the woman is kind of shitty. Like, I wish there was more of a moment for these two women. I wanted more. And I'm not sure if Ash is so blank and her romance is so insta-lovey because it's based on a fairy tale where that sort of happens. I'm not sure if that was done intentionally on Lo's part. But, I mean, this is a retelling, so why not make Cinderella fucking badass and give her a really badass romance? It was not what I wanted. is basically what I'm saying. That was my November wrap up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Have you read any of these books? Would you like a full review on any of these books? Because, I don't know, I don't tend to do full reviews anymore. These little mini reviews are much easier and tend to get better engagement. So if there is something you would really like a full review on, do let me know in the comments down below. Also let me know what you read in November. What did you like? What was your favorite read? If you liked what you saw here today, give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!